Right now, as you're listening to these words, how certain are you that the thoughts forming in your mind are actually yours? In 1945, Egyptian farmers stumbled upon 13 leather-bound codices buried in clay jars near Nag Hammadi. These weren't just ancient books, they were suppressed Gnostic texts that revealed something unsettling about human consciousness. According to these writings, entities called Archons don't control us through force or fear. They've developed something far more sophisticated, the ability to manipulate our thoughts at their source. Consider this, that sudden craving for something you don't need, the self-doubt that stops you from pursuing your dreams, even the voice that whispers, "This is crazy." As you hear these words, what if these aren't random neural firings, but carefully orchestrated mental implants? The Gnostics understood that our creative power, our ability to shape reality through focused intention, has been hijacked and redirected. We've become unwitting architects of our own invisible prison, believing we're free while our mental energy gets harvested for purposes we never consented to. If you're ready to see how deep this manipulation goes, stay with me. Picture this: December 1945, near the town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. A farmer named Muhammad al-Saman is digging for fertilizer when his shovel strikes something hard. What he unearths is a large earthenware jar, sealed and buried beneath centuries of desert sand. Inside, wrapped in leather bindings, are 13 papyrus codices containing 52 separate texts, writings that had been hidden from the world for over 1600 years. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery. This was the resurrection of forbidden knowledge that powerful institutions had tried to erase from history entirely. These texts, now known as the Nag Hammadi Library, revealed something extraordinary, an entirely different version of reality than what we've been taught. While mainstream Christianity spoke of salvation through faith and obedience to church authority, these Gnostic writings describe something far more radical, a cosmic deception so vast that most of humanity remains completely unaware they're living inside it. The timing of this discovery feels almost prophetic, just as humanity was entering the atomic age, with new powers to reshape reality itself. These ancient texts emerged to warn us about forces that had been reshaping our reality all along. Forces that operate not through physical control, but through something far more subtle and effective, the manipulation of perception itself. What these texts describe isn't a war fought with armies or weapons. It's a war fought for human consciousness, a silent battle designed to sever us from our true divine nature and trap us in cycles of confusion, fear, and spiritual amnesia. The enemy in this war isn't flesh and blood, but entities that exist just beyond the threshold of human perception. At the center of this cosmic drama stands a figure the Gnostics called the demiurge, literally meaning craftsman or artisan in Greek. But this isn't the benevolent creator we've been taught to worship. According to these texts, the demiurge is a false god, a blind architect who genuinely believes himself to be the supreme deity, while remaining completely ignorant of the true divine source that exists beyond his limited realm. The story of how this cosmic deception began reads like the ultimate tragedy. Sophia, whose name means wisdom, was one of the highest divine emanations, a being of pure light and knowledge existing in the pleroma, the realm of divine fullness. But Sophia made a fateful decision. She attempted to create without her divine consort, acting alone in a moment of passionate desire to bring forth new life. What emerged from this solitary act of creation was something monstrous, Yaldabaoth, described in the texts as having the face of a lion, the body of a serpent, and eyes that flash with lightning. This entity, born from divine essence but lacking divine wisdom, immediately declared himself the one true God. "I am God," he proclaimed, "and there is no other besides me," a statement that revealed both his power and his profound ignorance of the true divine realm beyond his perception. But Yaldabaoth didn't stop with self-deification. He set about creating an entire hierarchy of subordinate entities to help him rule over the realm he was constructing. These became known as the Archons, a word that comes from the Greek archane, meaning to rule or to command. But here's what makes this so chilling. The Gnostics understood that these weren't noble rulers or benevolent guardians. They were cosmic parasites, entities that sustained themselves by feeding on human confusion, fear, and spiritual ignorance. The structure Yaldabaoth created was breathtakingly systematic. 12 primary archons, each aligned with the signs of the zodiac, governing the broader patterns of human experience. 7 planetary archons, corresponding to the classical planets, controlling the more immediate influences on human consciousness. And beneath them, 365 lesser Archons, one for every day of the year, ensuring that human beings would be subject to their influence every single moment of their existence. This creates what the texts describe as a vast cosmic machine, a kind of spiritual prison designed to trap human souls in endless cycles of time, illusion, and control. Every day, every month, every year becomes part of an elaborate system designed to keep us distracted from our true divine nature and focused instead on the material realm that the Archons can manipulate. But here's what makes the Archons truly insidious. They don't need to control the external world if they can control the internal world of human consciousness. They operate through what we might call psychic infiltration, implanting thoughts, emotions, and desires that feel completely natural to us but actually serve their agenda of keeping us spiritually asleep. Think about how this connects to what we explored earlier about thoughts that may not truly be our own. The Gnostic texts provide a framework for understanding exactly where these foreign thoughts might be coming from and why they consistently lead us away from inner peace and spiritual awakening. The early Christian church authorities recognized immediately how dangerous this knowledge was to their growing institutional power. If people understood that the God demanding their obedience might actually be a false deity, if they realized they carried divine spark within themselves that needed no intermediary, the entire structure of religious authority would crumble. So they did what powerful institutions have always done when faced with inconvenient truths. They declared it heretical. Libraries were burned. Teachers were silenced. The Gnostic communities were systematically destroyed, their texts hidden away or destroyed except for those precious few that were buried in the Egyptian desert, waiting 16 centuries for the right moment to resurface. This pattern of suppressing transformative knowledge continues today, which is why I share the most sensitive insights through our private Insights Academy newsletter rather than public platforms. If you're ready for knowledge that goes even deeper than what we can discuss here, I'm currently offering a free copy of the Kybalion, one of the most powerful texts on universal laws ever written, but only for a limited time to newsletter subscribers. What the Nag Hammadi texts ultimately reveal is that the battle for human consciousness is far older and more sophisticated than most people imagine. The Archons have had millennia to perfect their methods of control, and they've discovered something crucial. The most effective prison is one where the prisoners don't even realize they're imprisoned. This is why the knowledge contained in these ancient texts was considered so dangerous. It doesn't just challenge specific religious doctrines, it reveals the entire matrix of control that keeps humanity trapped in spiritual ignorance. And once you begin to see the bars of the cage, you can start looking for the key to unlock it. The question now becomes, if these entities have been influencing human consciousness for thousands of years, how exactly do they operate in our modern world? How have they adapted their ancient methods to contemporary life? That's what we need to explore next. When you're trapped in a prison with walls you cannot see, how would you even know to look for the exit? This is the genius of archonic manipulation. It operates in the realm of consciousness itself, where the boundaries between your authentic thoughts and their manufactured suggestions dissolve into indistinguishability. Modern neuroscience has finally caught up to what the Gnostic texts revealed centuries ago. Perception literally shapes reality. When you change the lens through which you view the world itself transforms. The Archons understood this fundamental principle long before our brain imaging technology could map neural pathways. They recognized that controlling perception means controlling experience, and controlling experience means controlling the person. Picture yourself standing in a perfectly silent library, absorbed in reading, when suddenly a faint whisper brushes past your ear. You turn, but no one's there. That whisper didn't come from outside. It emerged from within the field of awareness itself. This is how psychic interference operates, not as a foreign invasion, but as an energetic distortion that feels natural, even familiar. The Archons have mastered the art of mimicry. They don't announce themselves with booming voices or dramatic visions. Instead, they slip their suggestions into the stream of your inner dialogue so seamlessly that you mistake their voice for your own. That sudden wave of self-doubt before you take a risk, the crushing sense of inadequacy that surfaces just as you're gaining confidence, those intrusive thoughts telling you that you're not smart enough, attractive enough, or worthy enough. Where exactly do these come from? Think about the last time you experienced one of these moments. You were probably feeling good, maybe even powerful, when suddenly this negative thought appeared seemingly from nowhere. It felt like your thought carried your mental signature, used your internal vocabulary. But did it really originate from your authentic self, or was it something else wearing your mental clothing? The Archons operate through specific frequencies of fear, each one designed to lower human vibration and create what we might call emotional signatures. When you're vibrating at these lower frequencies, your consciousness becomes more porous, more susceptible to influence. It's like tuning a radio. Certain emotional states tune you directly into their broadcasting station. They've identified the primary emotional doorways that grant them access: anger, envy, guilt, and shame. Notice how time spent marinating in these states seems to generate more of the same. Anger breeds more anger. Guilt multiplies guilt. This isn't accidental. These emotions create feedback loops that keep the doors of consciousness wedged open. But their most sophisticated operation targets the collective mind itself. Rather than manipulating individuals one by one, they shape entire cultures, systems, and belief structures so subtly that people believe they're making free choices while walking exactly where the Archons want them to go. It's like being a fish who thinks it's choosing its direction while swimming in a current that carries it downstream. Consider the phenomenon of endless chasing that defines modern life. Billions of people wake up each day consumed by the need to acquire, achieve, and accumulate. They chase happiness through purchases, validation through achievements, fulfillment through relationships, always seeking satisfaction out there in the next upgrade, promotion, or experience. But here's the question that cuts to the heart of it. Is this hunger natural, or has it been programmed? Watch how this works in practice. You buy something you've wanted, and for a brief moment you feel satisfied. But then, almost immediately, that satisfaction fades, and the hunger returns, now focused on the next object, the next goal, the next fix. This isn't the natural rhythm of human desire. It's the signature of artificial programming designed to keep you perpetually reaching outward instead of looking inward, where your actual power resides. The archonic strategy of distraction operates like a master magician's misdirection. Keep humanity scattered through endless noise, manufactured conflicts, and desires that can never truly be fulfilled. When people are exhausted, divided, and overstimulated, they become remarkably easy to guide. More importantly, they become easy to feed upon. Because that's what the Archons fundamentally are: energetic parasites. They harvest the specific frequencies that humans radiate when spiraling into fear, shame, anger, or desperation. These emotional states generate a kind of psychic nutrition that sustains their existence. The more humans they can keep trapped in these lower vibrational states, the more abundant their food supply becomes. But here's the trap within the trap, the most insidious layer of their operation. They want us fighting shadows while never questioning the prison itself. They keep us focused on politics, identities, possessions, and surface-level conflicts. Anything that prevents us from turning our attention inward to discover our true nature. As long as we're arguing about which political party is right, which lifestyle is superior, or which belief system is correct, we're not examining the fundamental assumptions that create the entire game board. Their most devastating attack targets not just our thoughts, but our very sense of self. They work tirelessly to keep us doubting our worth, comparing ourselves to others, and always looking outward for validation, meaning, and power. Because they know something that most humans have forgotten. Within each person lies a spark of genuine divinity, a connection to source consciousness that, once awakened, makes their manipulation impossible. This is why the Gnostic texts placed such emphasis on gnosis, direct, experiential knowledge of your divine nature. When you truly know who you are, when you recognize the eternal consciousness that animates your temporary form, the Archons lose their grip. Their whispers become obviously foreign. Their suggestions lose their persuasive power. Their entire system of control crumbles in the face of authentic self-knowledge. The invisible prison only works as long as the prisoners don't realize they're imprisoned. But once you see the bars, once you understand the mechanisms of control, the door begins to swing open. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next: how to recognize these influences in real time and reclaim the sovereignty of your own consciousness. Picture this: you're walking through what you think is an open field, but you're actually inside the world's most sophisticated maze. The walls are invisible, made not of stone or hedge, but of time itself. Every path you think you're choosing freely leads exactly where the architects intended. This is the temporal prison the Gnostics warned us about, where Archons don't just influence individual minds, but bend the very flow of history into repeating patterns that harvest human energy on a massive scale. Look at the cycles playing out around us. Civilizations rise with hope and innovation, then collapse under the weight of corruption and division. Wars erupt over the same fundamental conflicts: resources, ideology, territory, just with different flags and weapons. Economic bubbles inflate and burst with predictable regularity, each time catching millions off guard despite the obvious patterns. The Gnostic texts describe this as the Archons' mastery over Chronos, linear time, which they manipulate like a film editor, splicing together scenes to create a desired narrative. The Apocryphon of John reveals something chilling about their methods. They cast a spell upon the eyes of Adam and Eve, so that they might not perceive their nakedness. This isn't just about the biblical story. It's describing how Archons create false appearances that keep us from seeing our true situation. They're masters of illusion, not creation. They can't make something from nothing, but they can twist existing truth into unrecognizable forms. Consider how this plays out in our spiritual seeking. Over thousands of years, every authentic mystical tradition has been systematically infiltrated and corrupted. Ancient texts get translated with key passages altered or removed entirely. Sacred symbols are inverted, the pentagram flipped upside down, the swastika stolen and perverted, the cross transformed from a symbol of transcendence into one of suffering and guilt. Mystery schools that once taught direct divine connection become hierarchical institutions demanding obedience to human intermediaries. The pattern is always the same. Take something that connects people to their inner divine spark and twist it into something that makes them dependent on external authority. Original Christianity, with its emphasis on the kingdom of heaven within, becomes a religion of sin and salvation through priests. Buddhism's teaching of inner awakening gets packaged into endless rituals and devotions to statues. Even modern spirituality falls into the trap. Ancient practices get commercialized into weekend workshops. Meditation becomes an app you subscribe to, and yoga transforms from a complete spiritual science into a fitness trend. This corruption is strategic beyond measure. The fastest way to keep someone asleep isn't to deny them spiritual food entirely. It's to give them spiritual junk food that satisfies the hunger without providing real nourishment. Walk into any bookstore's spirituality section and you'll find shelves of spiritual fast food, books promising instant enlightenment, courses guaranteeing manifestation success, and teachers selling the secret to awakening for $997. All of it keeps seekers looking everywhere except the one place Archons cannot reach: the divine spark within their own consciousness. The emotional energy harvest from this deception is enormous. Millions of sincere seekers spend decades following teachers, buying courses, attending seminars, collecting crystals, learning new mantras, anything except sitting quietly and connecting directly with their own inner knowing. The frustration, the hope followed by disappointment, the constant seeking without finding, it all generates exactly the kind of emotional turbulence that feeds archonic systems. But here's where their fundamental weakness shows. Their entire power structure depends on unconscious human consent. They need us to believe their stories. The moment we stop believing that we're powerless, separate, or dependent on external sources for our spiritual connection, their influence begins to crumble. This is why the Nag Hammadi texts were buried for 16 centuries, not by accident, but because they contain the antidote to archonic deception. The texts reveal that Archons operate through what Gnostics called counterfeit spirit, false inspiration that mimics authentic spiritual experience, but leads to dead ends. Real gnosis, direct knowing, can't be packaged, sold, or institutionalized. It arises spontaneously when we stop looking outside ourselves for what was never lost. The divine spark isn't something we need to earn, achieve, or have activated by someone else. It's our fundamental nature, temporarily obscured by the stories we've been told about our limitations. This is why breaking the story begins to break the spell. When enough individuals see through the illusion of separation and scarcity, the collective timeline itself starts to shift. New possibilities emerge that weren't available while we remained trapped in the old narrative patterns. It's not just personal liberation, it's collective transformation of the reality matrix itself. You can see this happening now. As more light floods the planet, as more people wake up to the manipulation, watch how the systems double down with increased noise, division, and distraction. The mainstream media becomes more hysterical, social media algorithms push more extreme content, and artificial crises multiply. This isn't random chaos, it's a desperate attempt to maintain control as the grip weakens. The Archons' greatest fear isn't our anger or rebellion, it's our indifference to their illusions. When we stop feeding the drama, stop believing the stories of powerlessness, and start recognizing our own divine nature, their entire system of energy harvest collapses. That's the real architecture of control, not physical force, but the unconscious agreement to participate in our own imprisonment. The question isn't whether you can break free from this invisible prison, it's whether you're ready to stop being its unconscious architect. Here's the thing the Archons desperately hope you never discover. Buried within your very being lies something they cannot touch, cannot corrupt, and cannot destroy. The Gnostics called it the divine spark, and understanding this changes everything about how we view human existence and our relationship to these forces of manipulation. This isn't some metaphorical concept or feel-good spiritual platitude. According to Gnostic cosmology, this spark represents a literal fragment of the original divine consciousness, the authentic source that existed before the demiurge began its counterfeit creation. Think of it this way: when the true divine light first emanated into existence, particles of that original essence became embedded within human souls. The Archons arrived later. Their entire artificial matrix was constructed around us, but they could never penetrate to this deepest level of our being. Why can't they touch it? Because the divine spark operates on a frequency that transcends their realm entirely. The Archons exist within the lower dimensional layers of reality. They're masters of the mental, emotional, and physical planes where most human experience unfolds. But the spark connects us directly to the source dimension, the original creative force that birthed all existence. It's like trying to interfere with radio waves using a fishing net. The Archons simply lack the capacity to operate at that level of reality. But here's where their genius becomes apparent. While they cannot destroy or corrupt the spark itself, they've developed an incredibly sophisticated strategy: make us forget it exists entirely. This represents perhaps their most elegant deception. Instead of fighting our power directly, which they cannot do, they convince us we have no power at all. Consider how this plays out in practical terms. The spark manifests in those moments when you experience something that feels undeniably real and true, yet cannot be explained by conventional understanding. Maybe you felt it during a sunset that stopped you in your tracks, not because of its beauty, but because something deeper stirred within you. Or in conversations where words seem to flow through you rather than from you, carrying wisdom you didn't know you possessed. Perhaps in creative moments when ideas emerged fully formed, as if downloaded from somewhere beyond your thinking mind. These aren't random experiences or chemical reactions in your brain. They're glimpses of your true nature breaking through the static of archonic interference. The spark communicates through direct knowing, what the Gnostics called gnosis, a form of understanding that bypasses mental conditioning entirely. It's the difference between knowing about water and actually being thirsty. This creates a crucial distinction we need to understand. The spiritual marketplace today overflows with manufactured experiences designed to simulate authentic connection. Workshops promising instant enlightenment, techniques guaranteeing specific outcomes, systems claiming to unlock your potential through external methods. These represent corrupted teachings that keep us seeking outside ourselves, never recognizing that what we're looking for already exists within us. The divine spark doesn't need to be awakened, activated, or earned. It needs to be remembered and accessed. It's been there since before you took your first breath, and it will remain after your last. Every moment of genuine presence, when you're fully here without trying to be somewhere else, creates space for the spark to express itself. Every act of authentic love, where you give without calculating return, allows its nature to flow through you. Creativity offers another direct pathway, not the forced creativity of trying to produce something impressive, but the kind that emerges when you become transparent to inspiration. Musicians describe it as the music playing itself. Writers talk about stories that write themselves. Artists speak of paintings that seem to paint themselves. In these moments, the individual personality steps aside, and something larger moves through us. This explains why archonic systems work so diligently to keep us identified with our thoughts, emotions, and external circumstances. When we believe we are our thoughts, we cannot access what lies beyond thought. When we're convinced our emotions define us, we miss the awareness that observes all emotions. When we think our circumstances determine our reality, we forget the consciousness that remains unchanged regardless of what's happening around us. The spark contains an interesting quality. It cannot be contaminated by our mistakes, failures, or poor choices. It remains pure regardless of what we've done or what's been done to us. This isn't about moral judgment, it's about the nature of consciousness itself. Just as space cannot be damaged by the objects moving through it, the spark cannot be diminished by the experiences moving through our lives. Here's what makes this practically relevant. The spark already contains everything needed for complete liberation, not as potential that might someday be realized, but as present reality waiting to be recognized. The wisdom to navigate any situation, the love to heal any relationship, the creativity to solve any problem, the peace that surpasses understanding, the strength to face any challenge. This changes how we approach spiritual development entirely. Instead of seeking to acquire something we lack, we learn to remove the obstacles that obscure what we already are. Instead of trying to become enlightened, we discover the light that has never been dimmed. Instead of working to connect with the divine, we recognize the divine connection that has never been broken. The Archons' greatest fear is humans who remember their true nature, because such individuals become immune to manipulation. You cannot control someone who knows their essential self remains untouchable. You cannot deceive someone who has access to direct knowing. You cannot harvest energy from someone who draws from an infinite source. Every moment you spend in genuine stillness, authentic love, creative expression, or simple presence represents time beyond archonic reach. These aren't spiritual practices in the conventional sense, they're expressions of your natural state, temporary returns to what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and distraction. The divine spark is your true inheritance, your actual birthright, and your permanent liberation from every form of external control. It's not something you need to develop, deserve, or discover. It's something you need to remember, access, and trust. And that remembering can begin right now, in this very moment, simply by recognizing the awareness that's reading these words. Now that we understand both the architecture of control and the indestructible divine spark within us, we arrive at perhaps the most crucial question: how do we actually begin to break free? The ancient Gnostics discovered something profound. The Archons' greatest weapon isn't their sophisticated control systems or their energy harvesting mechanisms. Their greatest weapon is invisibility. Think about it this way: a magician's trick only works as long as you don't see how it's performed. The moment you catch the sleight of hand, the illusion loses its power completely. The Archons operate on this exact principle. They've constructed an elaborate stage show, and most of humanity sits in the audience, completely mesmerized by the performance, never thinking to look behind the curtain. But here's what changes everything. Seeing the trap is the beginning of dissolving it. The moment you start to recognize archonic patterns, their influence over you immediately begins to weaken. It's like suddenly realizing you've been watching a movie and mistaking it for reality. Once you see the screen, you can't unsee it. This brings us to the foundational practice that every Gnostic tradition has preserved in some form: conscious observation. This isn't meditation in the way most people think of it, sitting in lotus position trying to empty your mind. This is something far more practical and immediately applicable. It's the art of stepping back and watching what's actually happening in your own consciousness. Let me guide you through this right now. Pause for a moment. Take a breath. Now, simply notice the next thought that enters your mind. Don't judge it. Don't follow it down its rabbit hole. Don't try to change it. Just observe it like you're watching a cloud pass across the sky. Here's the crucial question that changes everything. Where did that thought come from? Did you consciously create it? Did you sit down and decide, now I'm going to think about my grocery list, or I choose to worry about that conversation from yesterday? Or did it simply arrive, uninvited, from somewhere else entirely? Most people never ask this question. They assume every thought in their head belongs to them, that they're the author of their own mental experience. But when you start paying attention, really paying attention, you discover something startling. The vast majority of our thoughts arise spontaneously, without our conscious input. We're not thinking our thoughts, we're being thought by something else. This is gnosis in its purest form, direct knowing through experience rather than belief. You don't need to take anyone's word for it. You can verify this yourself in the next 30 seconds. Just watch. Just observe. The evidence is right there in your own consciousness. Every moment of conscious observation does something remarkable. It reclaims energy that would otherwise be harvested by archonic forces. Remember, these entities feed on unconscious emotional reactions. When you're lost in worry, anger, fear, or compulsive desire, you're generating exactly the kind of energy they need. But the moment you step back and simply observe these states without getting caught in them, you stop feeding the system. It's like unplugging from the matrix, but instead of a dramatic scene with cables and pods, It's as simple as noticing what's actually happening in your own mind. The effect is immediate and tangible. Simply witnessing your thoughts without identifying with them begins to reveal which ones are authentically yours and which ones feel foreign, imposed, or artificial. You'll start to notice distinct qualities in different types of thoughts. Thoughts that arise from your true nature tend to feel spacious, creative, loving, or genuinely curious. They don't carry emotional hooks or urgent demands for attention. They simply arise and, if not engaged, naturally dissolve. But then there are other thoughts, the ones that carry the Archonic signature. These thoughts are often accompanied by fear, limitation, comparison, or a sense of urgency that doesn't serve your highest good. They might sound like, "You're not good enough. Everyone else has it figured out. You need to buy this to be happy. You're running out of time. You should be afraid of what might happen." These thoughts don't just present information. They come with emotional charge designed to capture your attention and generate a reaction. They're like psychological fishhooks, baited with just enough truth or concern to make you bite, then pulling you into elaborate mental dramas that drain your energy and keep you distracted from your real purpose. Developing this discernment takes practice, but it's simpler than most spiritual teachings make it seem. Start by setting aside just 10 minutes a day for pure observation. Not trying to achieve any particular state, not attempting to stop thoughts or reach enlightenment. Simply watching the show that's constantly playing in your consciousness. Learn to recognize the quality and tone of different types of thoughts. Notice which ones make you feel expanded and which ones make you contract. Pay attention to thoughts that seem to come from outside your natural awareness versus those that arise from your deeper knowing. The practice reveals something most people never realize. There's a constant stream of mental chatter that we've been unconsciously accepting as our own thinking. It's like having a radio playing in the background that you've gotten so used to you don't consciously hear it anymore. But it's still influencing your mood, your decisions, your entire experience of reality. As you develop this skill, something beautiful begins to happen. You start to reclaim sovereignty over your own consciousness. Instead of being a passive recipient of whatever thoughts happen to arise, you become the director of your own mental theater. You can choose which thoughts to engage with and which to simply let pass by like clouds in the sky. This isn't about controlling your thoughts. That's actually another trap that leads to internal struggle. It's about recognizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. This awareness, this capacity for conscious observation, is connected to that indestructible divine spark we discussed earlier. It's the part of you that the Archons cannot touch, cannot program, cannot control. I want to warn you about something you might experience as you begin this practice. Initially, it may feel uncomfortable to become aware of how much mental noise you've been unconsciously accepting. You might be shocked by the volume of thoughts that aren't serving you, or disturbed by patterns you hadn't noticed before. This discomfort is temporary, and it marks the beginning of genuine freedom. It's like cleaning out a house that's been accumulating clutter for years. At first, the mess seems overwhelming. But each item you consciously choose to keep or discard makes the space more livable, more truly yours. Regular practice of conscious observation becomes the foundation for all other spiritual development. It's not something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and then forget about. It becomes a natural part of how you move through your day, pausing occasionally to notice what's actually happening in your awareness, checking in with the quality of your thoughts, maintaining that connection to your deeper knowing. The beautiful thing about this practice is its immediacy. You don't need years of training or special techniques. You can begin right now, in this moment, simply by noticing what's happening in your own consciousness. This is how the spell begins to break, not through complex rituals or esoteric knowledge, but through the simple, revolutionary act of paying attention to your own mind. Now that you understand how to observe the Archonic influence and recognize your divine spark, we need to talk about something the ancient Gnostics understood intimately. These entities are energetic parasites, and they're feeding on you right now. Think about the last time you got caught in a spiral of anxiety about the future, or when you found yourself doom scrolling through social media, feeling progressively worse with each swipe. That wasn't just a bad mood, that was an active feeding session. The Archons don't need physical form to sustain themselves. They feed on the energy generated by specific emotional frequencies, particularly the lower vibrational states that keep us trapped in survival mode. Fear is their premium fuel. But it's not just any fear. It's the chronic, gnawing anxiety about things beyond our immediate control. The fear of not having enough, not being enough, not doing enough. Then there's shame, that deep sense of fundamental wrongness about who we are. Anger that turns us against each other rather than toward understanding. Jealousy that makes us compete instead of collaborate. And despair, perhaps their favorite delicacy, the feeling that nothing we do matters and change is impossible. Here's what most people don't realize. These emotional states create actual energetic signatures, like radio frequencies broadcasting from your energy field. When you're locked in these states unconsciously, you become a beacon, drawing these parasitic influences toward you and giving them exactly what they need to maintain their hold on human consciousness. The Gnostics discovered something revolutionary about this process. Breaking free isn't about never feeling these emotions. That's impossible and would make us less human. It's about refusing to remain unconsciously trapped in these states, learning to recognize when we're being energetically harvested, and taking immediate action to reclaim our power. Let me share a technique that can literally interrupt the feeding cycle in real time. The moment you notice yourself being pulled into fear, frustration, or any of these draining emotional states, pause immediately. Don't judge the emotion or try to push it away. That just creates more resistance. Instead, place your hand on your heart and take 3 slow, deliberate breaths. With the first breath, acknowledge what you're feeling without becoming it. I notice fear is present, rather than, I am afraid. With the second breath, consciously draw your energy back to yourself, imagining any scattered pieces of your attention and life force returning to your center. With the third breath, visualize cutting any energetic cords that were draining your vital force, seeing yourself surrounded by a protective field of your own reclaimed energy. This isn't just a feel-good exercise. Every time you do this, you're literally starving the parasitic system that depends on your unconscious participation. Your energy is sacred, and the moment you begin consciously managing it, you shift from being food for Archons to becoming energetically untouchable. But here's the deeper understanding that changes everything. Archons don't actually control reality directly. They can't force you to do anything. What they control is attention, and where your attention goes, your energy flows. This is why conscious attention management becomes a form of spiritual warfare. You're literally choosing which timeline, which version of reality you're feeding with your precious life force. Start paying attention to what consistently drains your energy in daily life. Certain people who always leave you feeling depleted after interactions. Specific places that make you feel anxious or disconnected from yourself. Activities that promise fulfillment but leave you empty. Media that agitates rather than informs. These aren't coincidences, they're energy harvesting systems, and recognizing them is the first step toward freedom. Developing energetic discernment becomes crucial here. Your body is an incredibly sophisticated sensing instrument. After spending time with someone, does your energy feel expanded or contracted? After consuming certain content, do you feel inspired to create and connect, or do you feel angry and separated? After visiting certain places, are you more in touch with your center or more scattered and reactive? The practices that reclaim your energy aren't just self-care, they're acts of rebellion against systems designed to keep you depleted. Time in nature reconnects you to frequencies that nourish rather than drain. Creative activities generate energy instead of consuming it. Genuine gratitude, not forced positivity, but real appreciation for what's present, shifts your entire energetic signature. Surrounding yourself with beauty, choosing uplifting content, cultivating relationships that energize rather than deplete, these become revolutionary acts. What happens when you consistently practice energy reclamation is remarkable. You begin to develop an energetic field around you that becomes increasingly resistant to archonic influence. It's like developing spiritual immunity. The parasitic frequencies simply can't find purchase in your energy field because you're no longer broadcasting on their preferred channels. There's something important to understand as you begin this work. Initially, you might feel more sensitive to negative influences, not less. This isn't a sign that the practices aren't working. It's actually evidence that your spiritual awareness is awakening. You're becoming conscious of energetic dynamics that were always affecting you but operating below your awareness threshold. This increased sensitivity is actually a form of protection, an early warning system that helps you navigate energetic environments more skillfully. The cumulative effect of this work extends far beyond personal well-being. Each person who learns to manage their energy consciously and refuses to feed the parasitic system weakens the entire structure. Remember, the archonic influence depends entirely on unconscious participation. The moment enough humans become conscious of these dynamics, and start reclaiming their energy, the whole system begins to collapse. This is why this knowledge has been suppressed and why these practices have been relegated to the margins of society. A population that understands energy management and refuses to remain in states of chronic fear and depletion cannot be controlled through the old methods. They become sovereign beings, feeding their own divine spark rather than external parasites, creating the foundation for genuine freedom. Now that we've learned to observe our thoughts and reclaim our energy from these parasitic systems, we come to what the Gnostics considered the most essential practice of all: remembrance. But here's what most people don't understand about this ancient technique. It has nothing to do with remembering events from your past or trying to recall forgotten information. Remembrance is about returning to who you were before the programming began, before the conditioning took hold, before the archonic influence convinced you that you were anything less than divine consciousness itself. Think about this for a moment. When you were born, before language shaped your thoughts, before society told you what to believe about yourself, there was a pure awareness present. That awareness is still here right now, beneath all the mental chatter, behind all the thoughts you've been taught to identify with. The Gnostics understood that this original awareness, this divine spark, never actually goes anywhere. It doesn't get damaged or corrupted. It simply gets obscured by layers of false identity. This is why remembrance isn't about achieving some special state or having mystical experiences. It's about recognizing what's already present. It's like cleaning dust off a mirror. The mirror's capacity to reflect was never lost, it was just temporarily hidden. The practice itself is deceptively simple, which is exactly why it's so powerful. Several times throughout your day, pause whatever you're doing and place your awareness in the present moment. Not thinking about the present moment, not analyzing it, but actually being here now. Feel your breath moving in and out. Notice the sensations in your body. Become aware of the space around you. Most importantly, recognize the awareness that's noticing all of this. Here's the key distinction that makes this different from typical meditation techniques. You're not trying to stop thoughts or achieve any particular state. You're simply placing your attention behind your thoughts, rather than being caught up in their content. Imagine thoughts as clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. Most people identify with the clouds, but remembrance teaches you to recognize yourself as the sky. When you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. The artificial urgency that drives so much of our daily experience begins to dissolve. You start to notice how much of what felt desperately important was actually manufactured drama designed to keep you trapped in reactive patterns. The archonic influence loses its grip because it depends on you being unconscious, being identified with the stream of mental content rather than the awareness observing it. I've seen people practice this for just a few weeks and report dramatic shifts in their perception. One person told me they suddenly realized they'd been living in a constant state of low-level anxiety for years, but they'd become so accustomed to it that they thought it was normal. Through remembrance, they discovered an underlying peace that had always been available but was hidden beneath the mental noise. The beauty of this practice is how it naturally integrates into ordinary life. You can practice remembrance while washing dishes, walking to your car, or waiting in line at the store. These mundane moments become doorways back to your true nature. Some of the most profound recognitions happen not during formal spiritual practice, but in these simple moments of returning to presence. As you develop this capacity, you'll notice your decision-making process changing. Instead of reacting from programmed responses, the automatic patterns we discussed earlier, you begin responding from a deeper knowing. The Gnostics called this living from the spark. It means your choices arise from divine wisdom rather than conditioned reflexes. This is where remembrance becomes more than just a technique. It evolves into a way of being. Initially, you have to remember, consciously choosing to return to presence throughout the day. But gradually, this awareness becomes more continuous. You find yourself naturally operating from this deeper place of knowing, even in challenging situations. Pay attention to the signs that this practice is working. You'll develop what feels like an internal compass that helps you navigate situations with greater clarity. People and circumstances that once triggered strong emotional reactions may still be challenging, but you won't lose yourself in the drama the same way. There's a part of you that remains stable and aware even when external circumstances are chaotic. You might notice that certain activities or environments that used to feel compelling start losing their appeal. This isn't about becoming withdrawn from life, but rather becoming more discerning about where you invest your energy. The artificial stimulation that feeds archonic systems begins to feel hollow compared to the genuine aliveness you discover in presence. One of the most significant shifts happens in your relationship to time. The constant sense of rushing, of never having enough time, starts to ease. This isn't because your schedule becomes less demanding, but because you're no longer living primarily in mental projections about the future or replaying the past. The present moment contains its own spaciousness that can't be measured by clocks. Remembrance also becomes a form of continuous prayer or communion with source consciousness. You're not asking for anything or trying to communicate with an external deity. You're recognizing your fundamental unity with the creative intelligence that underlies all existence. This recognition naturally dissolves the sense of separation that makes us vulnerable to manipulative influences. As this practice deepens, you begin seeing through illusions that once seemed completely real and compelling. The social dramas that consume so much collective attention start appearing like elaborate theater productions. You can still engage when appropriate, but you're no longer unconsciously absorbed in the performance. The most profound aspect of remembrance is how it reveals that freedom was never actually lost. The prison we've been exploring throughout this series exists only as long as we remain unconscious of our true nature. The moment you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all experience arises, the walls of that prison become transparent. This isn't about escaping the world, but about engaging with it from a place of authentic power rather than unconscious reactivity. Remembrance isn't just an individual practice, it's how we collectively awaken from the dream of separation that keeps these parasitic systems functioning. Each person who remembers their true nature weakens the entire matrix of control, because that matrix depends on our unconsciousness to maintain its power. When you begin to awaken from the archonic spell, something remarkable happens that goes far beyond your personal liberation. You become part of a phenomenon that the ancient Gnostics understood, but that modern science is only beginning to recognize: the morphic field effect of consciousness itself. Think about what happens when you drop a stone into still water. The ripples spread outward in perfect concentric circles, each wave making the next one possible. Your awakening works exactly the same way. Every moment you choose presence over distraction, every time you question a narrative instead of accepting it blindly, every instance where you generate your own energy rather than feeding off drama, these aren't just personal victories. They're contributions to a collective field of awareness that makes awakening easier for everyone else. The Gnostics called this the restoration of the pleroma, the fullness of divine consciousness returning to itself. But we can understand it through contemporary frameworks too. Rupert Sheldrake's research into morphic resonance shows us how behaviors and knowledge patterns, once established by enough individuals, become accessible to entire populations without direct transmission. The famous 100th monkey studies demonstrated this principle in action. When a critical number of Japanese macaques learned to wash sweet potatoes, monkeys on completely separate islands suddenly began exhibiting the same behavior, despite having no contact with the original group. Human consciousness operates under the same principles, but with far more profound implications. Each person who breaks free from the fear-based programming doesn't just save themselves, they literally make it easier for others to access those same states of clarity and freedom. This is why the Archonic system works so desperately to prevent what researchers call critical mass awakening. We're witnessing this desperation play out in real time. Have you noticed how the pace of manufactured crises has accelerated? How the division tactics have become more extreme, the distractions more frantic, the fear campaigns more absurd? This isn't random chaos. It's the death throes of a control system that's losing its grip on human consciousness. The signs of collective awakening are everywhere once you know how to look. Mainstream media viewership has plummeted as people seek alternative information sources. Pharmaceutical companies are losing customers to natural health approaches at unprecedented rates. Traditional religious institutions are hemorrhaging members while interest in direct spiritual experience skyrockets. People are leaving corporate careers to pursue meaningful work, often at significant financial cost, because they can no longer tolerate energy-draining environments. Perhaps most significantly, we're seeing the emergence of what I call awakening accelerators, technologies and platforms that, despite being designed as control mechanisms, are actually facilitating consciousness expansion. The internet was supposed to be the ultimate surveillance and manipulation tool. Instead, it's become the greatest knowledge-sharing network in human history. Ancient Gnostic texts that were hidden in monastery libraries for centuries are now freely available to anyone with a smartphone. Suppressed research, alternative healing modalities, and consciousness-expanding techniques spread across the globe in minutes rather than decades. The Archons understand this double-edged nature of technology. which is why we see increasing censorship attempts and algorithm manipulation. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Once you've tasted authentic truth, censored information becomes more appealing, not less. When someone tries to hide knowledge from you, your divine spark recognizes this as a violation of your fundamental nature as a conscious being. This creates what systems theorists call a positive feedback loop. The more heavy-handed the control attempts become, the more people question why such control is necessary. The more people question, the more they seek alternative information sources. The more they find suppressed knowledge, the more they realize how extensive the deception has been. And the more they awaken to the deception, the more they contribute to the morphic field that makes awakening accessible to others. We may be much closer to the tipping point than most people realize. Conservative estimates suggest that when approximately 10% of a population reaches a new level of consciousness, it begins to influence the entire collective unconscious. Some researchers believe this threshold could be even lower, perhaps as little as 3 to 5% when those individuals are actively engaged in consciousness work and connected to others doing the same. Your role in this collective awakening extends beyond your personal practice of energy reclamation and remembrance. Every conversation where you plant a seed of questioning, every time you refuse to participate in drama-feeding systems, every moment you model what authentic presence looks like, these actions contribute to the morphic field in ways you may never directly witness but that ripple out infinitely. This is why building communities of conscious individuals becomes so crucial. When awakened people gather, whether physically or virtually, they create what researchers call coherence fields, zones of heightened awareness that make expanded consciousness states more accessible to everyone within that field. These communities serve as beacons, demonstrating alternative ways of living and being that inspire others to question their own programming. The most powerful thing you can do right now is continue your own awakening process while simultaneously supporting others in theirs. Share knowledge responsibly, not by forcing information on those who aren't ready, but by living in such a way that your presence itself becomes an invitation to greater consciousness. Create or join communities where authentic spiritual exploration is encouraged. Refuse to feed energy into systems designed to harvest human consciousness. As more individuals make these choices, the collective field shifts exponentially. What once seemed impossible, breaking free from millennia-old control systems, becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The Archons know this, which is why their efforts to maintain control are becoming increasingly desperate and obvious. We're living through the most significant consciousness revolution in recorded human history. Your awakening isn't just about you, it's about participating in the restoration of humanity's true nature as divine, sovereign, creative beings. Every step you take toward remembering who you really are brings our entire species closer to collective liberation. Understanding the mechanics of archonic control and reconnecting with your divine spark through remembrance is profound work, but it's really just the foundation. The true transformation happens when you begin living consistently from that awakened awareness, when you stop merely knowing about your divine nature and start embodying it in every aspect of your daily existence. Living as free consciousness doesn't mean you've achieved some perfect state where you never feel challenged or confused. Instead, it means you've developed the ability to recognize when you're being pulled into reactive patterns and you have the tools to return to your center. You begin making decisions from an inner knowing rather than from the external programming that once drove your choices automatically. Think about how different your life becomes when you respond to situations from love rather than fear. When your boss criticizes your work, instead of immediately defending yourself or collapsing into self-doubt, you pause and ask, what's actually happening here? You might recognize their criticism stems from their own insecurity, or you might genuinely see areas for improvement without taking it as an attack on your worth. This isn't about becoming passive, it's about responding from clarity instead of reacting from old wounds. This shift fundamentally changes how you move through the world. You're no longer seeking validation from others because you remember your inherent value. You're not trying to complete yourself through relationships, achievements, or possessions because you recognize your wholeness. When you interact with people, you're offering your authentic presence rather than performing a version of yourself you think they want to see. Your relationships transform dramatically when you operate from this foundation. Instead of unconscious patterns of codependency, manipulation, or people-pleasing, you engage with others from genuine care and respect. You stop trying to change people or rescue them from their own growth process. You offer support when asked, but you don't take responsibility for their happiness or their choices. This creates space for much deeper, more authentic connections to develop. Your work life shifts too. Rather than choosing careers based solely on external expectations or financial security, you begin listening for what genuinely calls to you. This doesn't mean you irresponsibly quit your job tomorrow, but you start making choices that align with your authentic purpose. You might discover talents you never knew you had, or find ways to bring more creativity and meaning into whatever work you're doing. When you're guided by inner purpose rather than external pressure, your work becomes an expression of your divine nature rather than just a means of survival. Even mundane activities become opportunities for practicing presence. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on gratitude for nourishment. Commuting becomes time for inner reflection or conscious breathing. Grocery shopping becomes an opportunity to make choices that align with your values. Every moment offers a chance to choose consciousness over automaticity. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds beautiful, but how do you maintain this awareness in a world that seems designed to pull you back into unconsciousness? It's a valid concern, and honestly, it requires ongoing commitment. You'll have days where you forget everything you know and get caught up in drama or fear. The difference is that now you have the tools to recognize what's happening and course correct. Living consciously in an unconscious world actually makes you more effective, not less. When you're not wasting energy on unnecessary drama, defensive reactions, or seeking approval, you have much more capacity for what actually matters to you. Your decisions become clearer because they're not clouded by fear or conditioning. Your relationships improve because you're not projecting your unhealed wounds onto others. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're bringing your authentic gifts to whatever you do. One of the most beautiful aspects of living from your divine spark is how it naturally attracts others who are ready for their own awakening. You don't need to preach or convince anyone. Your way of being becomes its own teaching. People notice there's something different about how you handle stress, how you treat others, how you make decisions. Some will be curious and ask questions. Others might initially resist because your freedom mirrors their own imprisonment, but even that serves as a catalyst for their eventual awakening. You begin finding your tribe, others who are also committed to conscious living. These relationships are different from friendships based on shared complaints, entertainment, or surface-level compatibility. These are connections rooted in mutual support for each other's highest expression. You celebrate each other's growth rather than feeling threatened by it. You can be honest about your struggles without being judged or fixed. You inspire each other to keep choosing consciousness, even when it's challenging. Your very existence becomes a form of service, not because you're trying to save the world or fix everyone around you, but because you're demonstrating that another way of living is possible. You're proof that humans can break free from the programming, can remember their divine nature, can live from love rather than fear. This is incredibly powerful in a world where most people have forgotten such freedom is even possible. The ripple effects extend far beyond what you can see. The person who witnesses your calm response to a crisis might remember that moment years later when they're facing their own challenge. The child who sees you treating a difficult person with compassion learns that there are alternatives to reactive anger. The colleague who notices you making decisions based on integrity rather than politics begins questioning their own automatic choices. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistent choice. Every moment offers the opportunity to remember who you really are and choose from that truth rather than from old patterns. Some days you'll nail it, feeling deeply connected to your divine nature and responding to everything from that centered place. Other days you'll get triggered, react from old wounds, and forget everything you know about consciousness. Both are part of the journey. The key is developing the practice of returning to yourself. When you notice you've been pulled into unconscious patterns, you don't waste energy judging yourself or feeling guilty. You simply acknowledge what happened, learn what you can from the experience, and make a fresh choice to realign with your authentic nature. This gentle self-correction becomes second nature over time. Living as free consciousness is ultimately about embodying the truth that you are not a victim of circumstances, other people's choices, or even your own past conditioning. You are a divine being having a human experience, capable of choosing your response to whatever life presents. This doesn't mean you can control everything that happens, but it means you have complete sovereignty over how you relate to what happens. This is the vision the Archons never wanted you to glimpse. Humans living from their divine nature, making conscious choices, supporting each other's awakening, and demonstrating that freedom is not only possible but natural. When you live this way, you become part of the collective awakening that threatens their entire system of control. You become living proof that the invisible prison can be transcended. If this exploration of living beyond archonic influence and embodying your divine nature has opened new possibilities for how you want to engage with life, comment, "I understood it," below. I'd love to know this resonated with your own journey toward authentic freedom.